Ah, the Caucasus, the land of incredible nature, amazing culture, beautiful women, and war. Hello and welcome to Explained, a web series on the internet where I attempt to explain complex political issues, meanwhile pissing off a bunch of nationalists. If you're new to the channel, click that subscribe button. There's a video every 2 weeks where I either go somewhere or explain something, and only 20% of my viewers are actually subscribed. It doesn't hurt you and you can unsub at any time you like. Anyways, as most of you should have heard by now, there was a short war in the year 2020 in the Caucasus, primarily focused in the region known as Nagorno Karabakh. Nagorno Karabakh is a region located, depending on who you ask. If you ask Armenia, they will tell you that, well, it's in Armenia. And if you ask the rest of the world, 99% will say it's in Azerbaijan. The war in Nagorno Karabakh lasted from September 27th till November 10th. With it having over 4,000 casualties and having half of the region occupied by Azerbaijan, which was previously occupied and controlled more or less by Armenia. For the average American, this war might seem pointless. Why would someone fight if they could just read some manga and watch JoJo? I mean, come on. Someone please come and have sex with my wife, please. But that would be anything but the case. To understand the war, we have to go back to when Jesus Christ was born. In the early days of human civilization, the Lower Caucasus were mainly inhabited by Armenians, who existed there even before the birth of humanity's favorite hippie, Jesus Christ. And for the most part, they lived in peace, if you disregard them constantly getting conquered by some Arab or Persian caliphate. However, in the 6th centuries, things changed when some nomad boys decided to look for greener pastures and migrate west. After getting bored of having a sore ass from all that horse riding, the nomads decided to settle in the Caucasus alongside the Armenians. These nomads would become known as the Azerbaijanis. Now, the Armenians and Azerbaijanis lived in relative peace. I say relative because how peaceful could you be in the Middle Ages with a neighboring heretic? The Armenians were Christians and the Azeris Muslim. Hell, the Armenians were the first people group to embrace Christianity fully, and the Azeris embraced Islam from the influence of the Middle East. However, throughout most of the centuries, they were more or less together under one empire or the other. Be it in the Sassanid Empire, the Umayyad Caliphate, the Abbasid Caliphate, the Seljuks, the Mongols, the Safavids, and the Ottomans. Either way, 90% of the time, they were suffering together under the oppression brought upon by some ruler expanding his empire simply because he was making up for not being able to have a normal relationship with a woman. One of those empires was, as I mentioned, the Ottoman Empire. Now, under the Ottomans, like most Christians, Armenians suffered as they were filthy disbelievers that wouldn't take the word of Allah. Armenians were the first people to embrace Jesus Christ as their Lord and Savior, and goddamn they were sticking to that title. And the Azeris more or less lived in prosperity, as not only were they Muslim like the Ottomans, they were also from a similar people group, as both the Ottomans and the Azeris came from previously mentioned Asian nomads known as the Turks. Thus they spoke a similar language and had somewhat of a similar culture. Anyways, the story of Nagorno-Karabakh isn't particularly interesting at this point of time, because basically the Armenians suffered like any other Christian people group, having their children taken away, put into the janissaries, and having to pay higher taxes simply for believing a hippie that created wine out of water. Sa-ta-ta-ta-ra. So, we might as well skip to the end of the Ottoman Empire. In the early 1900s, the Ottomans came to be known as the sick man of Europe, as they were basically a shell of an empire they used to be before, and they were losing territory left and right. You know something is wrong when even the Balkan spastics beat you up.
I want to be independent.
No!
He said the N-word!
However, in 1915, the Ottoman Empire decided to do a pro-gamer move and commit mass genocide of the Armenians. Why? Well, because the Ottoman government decided to blame the Armenians for the lack of performance in the empire, where between 600,000 and 1 million Armenians were mass murdered simply because of the Ottoman government believed they were holding the empire behind and they simply had to go, as the solution for a prosperous state was an ethnically clean one. A theory that one Austrian painter with a funny mustache would come to test 25 years later.
I want a fascist ethno-state for Christmas.
This notion, as you can imagine, proved to be false, and the Ottoman Empire lost the war and lost a bunch of its territory, including the areas of Armenia and Azerbaijan. During this time of independence, the Nagorno Karabakh issue started to arrive. However, it didn't reach peak importance, as after a couple of years both Armenia and Azerbaijan joined the USSR. This didn't prevent horrible violence such as the Shusha massacre, where the Azerbaijani army razed the Armenian part of the city to the ground and pulled a Notre Dame on the Gaziantep cathedral. Around 20,000 Armenians were killed in the massacre, and the defiled Gaziantep cathedral would become an important symbol of the city and survival for Armenia in the 90s war. Now, during the USSR years, Armenia and Azeris lived once more in relative peace. Nagorno-Karabakh was then again kind of an issue, mostly due to it being majority ethnically Armenian. However, it also had a large minority of Azeris living in the territory. The Armenians mostly inhabited the highlands, meanwhile the Azeris preferred not to go on a hike every day and keep their breath, so they lived in the lowlands. Then one day, the other funny mustache man from World War II, known as Stalin, decided to solve the Nagorno-Karabakh issue once and for all, and decided to give the territory to Azerbaijani jurisdiction, while the Armenian inhabited regions had some autonomy. And having this come from the man that killed over 20 million of his own people, no one dared to question the solution. Then in the late 80s, the Soviet Union was in its final stages and was splitting up, much like my parents when I was 10. And as the authority of the big Slavic alcoholic was weaning, the Nagorno-Karabakh question came into question again. The people of Nagorno-Karabakh decided to have a referendum to decide whether or not to stay with Azerbaijan or go with Armenia. Surprise, surprise, the people voted to leave Azerbaijan and go with Armenia. However, the Azeri government decided to not accept the result, so many Armenians started going out onto the streets to peacefully protest. However, their protests were met with a violent reply from the Azeris, and many became targets of attacks and pogroms, which was basically low-key ethnic cleansing, with many Armenians starting to be pushed out of their homes and attacked by the people who mistreated them a couple of centuries ago. Many old wounds opened up, particularly the one of genocide, which Turkey still denies to this day. Goddamn! Just fucking say you did it. Why can't you be normal? Jesus Christ, no one even cares that much. Just admit it!
No, I don't want to go! No!
So, war broke out and lasted for 6 long years, from 1988 till 1994. In this war, Turkey came to the aid of the Azeri brothers, and the Russians supported the Armenians. In the war, the Armenians emerged victorious and occupied most of Nagorno-Karabakh, while in the process ethnically cleansing the Azeris that previously lived in the region. However, even though the war was more or less a decisive Armenian victory, the international community did not recognize Nagorno-Karabakh as a newly independent nation, as it claimed it was. Unlike with some other cases, with the end of this war, tensions didn't stop. Over the years, there were several more skirmishes around the region, one of the more notable ones being in 2016, known as the 4-Day War, and now in 2020, where a ceasefire was established and Armenian troops were expelled from the newly occupied territory, with Russia acting as a peacekeeper in the region. Essentially, the conflict is far from over, and negotiations have begun where many heavy questions still lie to be answered, and justice on both sides awaits to be exacted. So basically, to summarize, Nagorno-Karabakh is a region inhabited by two drastically different people groups who both committed terrible atrocities to one another. Armenia claims the land based on historical and ethnic inhabitants, and Azerbaijan claims the land on the basis that it was given to them during the Soviet times, and many of their own people lived there but were kicked out by the Armenians during the late 80s and early 90s. Let me know what you think. Do you support Armenia? Do you support Azerbaijan? What do you think would be the best solution for the Nagorno Karabakh question? Do you think Israel is a legitimate state? Let me know in the comment section down below. And while you're down there, remember to hit that subscribe button if you like what I do. My name is Nick, and you've watched Living Ironically in Europe.
Jedno grba Kamila odmah se pomama.